We're always trying to hang on to the happy times, which are great. Mountaintop experiences are amazing. But you know what? You also have to look down the mountain to see how you got there.
Yeah.
You didn't just fly up there and there you're on the mountaintop. You actually had to claw yourself. You had to walk yourself. You had to get some bruises and some scars to get to the mountain to be able to see the beautiful horizon.
An inspiring author and a storyteller whose journey is all about connection, transformation, and finding treasures in life's storms. Her books, The Journey of Josephine and The Treasures of My Heart, inspire others to embrace their stories. What got you to where you're at today?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think that trauma, gets you to where you're at. I tell people now all the time that, the trauma got me to the door, but the lessons of my trauma got me inside the door. So, I've healed from the trauma to the most part, except that, there's some residue. But for the most part, all of that trauma, I don't think that trauma was meant for us to stay in one spot. That trauma is meant for us to learn lessons through them so that we can then take those traumas, step them at the door, and have somebody open up the door and say, hey, can I have the lessons that you learned from your trauma? So I guess that's where I'm at in my life. I'm at the door. The door has been open to me and says, come on in and share your lessons that you have learned through your trauma.
I love that. I love that so many folks have talked about like it's the hardships that got them the strength, right? That gets them to that next place. It's like training for the marathon, which you didn't realize that was training so that you could run this marathon and with joy, right? Versus just
Absolutely.
not being before like having to bail. So if you don't mind sharing really quickly, everybody has stuff. Everybody has stuff. If you don't have stuff,
You're not living life.
I don't even know. Like I've
You're just,
not met anybody who's just like everybody has stuff. It's
you sure
how we
do.
allow that stuff to impact, right? It either
Absolutely.
we choose to allow it to positively impact us or negatively impact us. And I hear people all the time, they're like, but this for me, they're different.
Yes.
And I've seen people like I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
how? Like, so
But the
share
greatest thing
really
is,
quickly what you overcame.
yeah, I
And
wanted to
what
say
makes you
too.
strong.
The greatest thing is too, if you learn the story of a pearl and you learn that the oyster has no pearl until that oyster has gone through some stuff. That oyster has to go through the parasites and the hurricanes and the sand trying to push itself into the oyster. And the bigger the trial, the bigger the hurricane, the more of the parasites that try to get inside of the oyster is the bigger the pearl. So if we can look at our own lives and realize that the stuff that we have gone through is creating a beautiful pearl that can be passed down to generations. So my story, is no different than a lot of people. I started off in a home that there was a lot of trauma. My father was an alcoholic. My grandfather, sexually abused me. I had tried to commit suicide 3 different times. My mom became a single parent. I tried to find love in all the wrong places and back seats of cars that, men weren't there to show me any kind of love. I ended up having a teenage pregnancy that saved my life. And then I got married and I went through, infidelity and being a victim of the domestic violence. I was a single mom. So there's all these things, that's an overview. But all those trials and everything created an amazing pearl. It's kind of like a metamorphosis. A metamorphosis, here you have that caterpillar that is going to turn into the butterfly, but he's got to go through stuff. And then he's got
You
to be
know what?
locked away into the cocoon.
I love like your attitude about that. You're like, this happened to me, but it's not like you're special because it happened to you, because this has
Exactly.
happened. This story has been told so many times by so
Absolutely.
many people. And I love that you're like, I'm not special because of this, right?
Correct.
This is what makes me special. I've overcome it. This like and this is my strength. This has gotten me to my pearl moment.
Absolutely. And it's turned into a metamorphosis. It's believing, it's the caterpillar being born, believing that he's always been a butterfly, but he's had to go through some stuff in order for him to be put into that chrysalis. And I really believe that the changing of the caterpillar into the butterfly, it's really about his mind, because he always was a butterfly. I
Yeah.
always was special. I always was somebody that was destined and had a purpose in my life. But I had to go through the dark moments in order for me to be able to let go and fly like the butterfly. So it's no
This
different.
is this is the perfect example of living life with gratitude.
Yes.
And I think also, all too often, people think that life has to be all so perfect and so fantastic, and all everything has to be lined up just perfect to have the gratitude. And you are such a great example of having gratitude in all the learning and the trials and the tribulation and the strengthening, the parasites, when you had
Yes.
gratitude in the parasite that came in, you have gratitude in the sand that came in, you have gratitude in the hurricane that you've gone through, you have gratitude
Absolutely.
in all of that. What a phenomenal example of that.
Absolutely. And I want to make it clear that sometimes it is an attitude adjustment. Sometimes I have to wake up in the morning and I have to say, this is going to be a good day. I want to
It's
make it
always an
very,
attitude
yeah,
adjustment.
I want to make it very clear that there are moments that are dark still in my life, but I have to choose to look at it differently. I have to choose to lay it down. I have to choose to make the difference. It doesn't mean the situations and the circumstances are changing. It just means that I have to choose. I have to choose, I'm a mother of 6 adult children. And I have 13 grandchildren, and I have to choose, and there are some of my children that don't speak to me. But I have to choose to know that there were 7 stories within inside of our home, 7 perspectives on how our home was being raised and what my children were thinking. So I have to have grace for their stories. I have to have grace also for their journey. So it doesn't mean there's not heartache in my life. And, so I just want your listeners to know that, I didn't wake up one morning and all of a sudden, life is grand and, it's, unicorns, and rainbows. It is me choosing to allow other people to walk through their journey and me having grace for them and having grace for myself.
Oh, this, like Mel Robbins, my friend was talking about her
I
new book,
love Mel
Let
Robbins.
Them. Yeah, so her book is Let Them. Let
Yeah,
them, right? Just let them. So making that choice, I already hear the excuses that people are saying, but you don't understand. Like like it's so hard. It's this whatever
it
lame ass
is.
excuse. There's how it be like right. Like we all have a reason, just like you have a reason. How did you get to that place? Were you like what techniques or how do you make that choice when the choice is so hard? Where it would be just so much easier just to be snappy or snippy or go under the covers or to behave badly. And I'm sure you have days that you do,
Absolutely.
but how do you make that conscious choice? And where does that come from?
I give myself those, like I surrounded myself with amazing friends, and I think that your life has to be intentional, because if it's not intentional, then other things are going to come into your life to destroy you. And it has to be always a conscious choice, and you have to make intentional decisions for yourself. My friends would say, you know what, Bambi, you got 10 minutes. You got 10 minutes to scream, yell, carry on, swear, put your fist up to God and say why. But then after those 10 minutes, then we're going to tell you the truth of who you are and what you've been through and the champion that you are. So it doesn't mean to hide the things that you have gone through, and it doesn't mean not to heal from them, and it doesn't mean to just stick them aside and put them in a box and not have the box open. It means that yes, many times in my life I've been thrown into the ditch, but I've had to crawl myself out of that, because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. After a while, people don't want to hear your humdrum story anymore. Yes, I'm a victim of domestic violence, but there's only so many times that I can tell people that before they finally, okay, Bambi, we know. And you have to just realize that everybody has a story, and you do have moments that you can tell your story, but then you have to have those moments that you let go of your story.
Where you stop being a victim and
Stop being a victim.
stop giving your power to the person who
Yes.
victimized, or
And you have
the
to
group,
realize,
or the government. Like, everybody has something. It's the government, it's the economy, it's my grandfather, it's my parents, it's my childhood, it's my lack of education, it's my it's the way I look, it's a everybody can choose to have that. But I've seen some
absolutely.
really people who've been some legit trauma. Like,
Yep.
you've been through some legit trauma, and those who haven't, right? And somebody was telling me, they're like, once you're an adult and you've been an adult for a few years, you just can't blame it on somebody, on your childhood, or
Absolutely.
blame it on somebody else. Like that opportunity to blame it on somebody else, that time, that you're holding on to that. Like, you got to let that
Absolutely.
go, because you've had opportunity to change and to switch and to have grown. So
Absolutely. And it comes to
what
a point, I was just going to say, it comes to a point that there's the elephant in the room. For a while, the elephant in the room was my ex-husband that, decided to cheat on me throughout our marriage. That was an elephant in the room. My other second husband, he was the one that I was a victim of domestic violence. That was an elephant in the room. And once you begin to talk about that elephant in the room, that elephant has to move, because there's a new elephant that's coming in, and that elephant is you. That now you have to be able to look at your own self, and you have to look at your own, why did I choose those people? What's the condition of my heart? What kind of work do I have to go through? Because after a while, I don't need to talk about what my ex-husbands did to me. That elephant in the room has been removed. Now it's time to
Mhm.
talk about the elephant that's me. For me to be for me to be transformed and use those things, to bring healing to others. I now sell a
You
t-shirt that
took back your power. I
I took
love
back
how you
my
just took
power.
back the power. Like you just took it, and like, you didn't allow them to have that power
No.
anymore.
And I don't even care what they say about me anymore. Like I'm part of this divorce group on Facebook, and and I'm one of the speakers on this group, and I've realized that some these women are still in those stages,
Yeah.
of not taking responsibility, because you know what? It's hard to look at yourself. It's hard to look at yourself to say that you are some of the blame, because we always want to hand over the blame to somebody else. But some of the blame is my fault. And I have to be okay with that. And I look at too, when I think about life, when I was 49 years old, somebody said to me, Bambi, you got to do something extraordinary because you're going to be 50, so you got to do something extraordinary. And I read Mel Robbins' book. So it's so funny that you did that, the 5-second rule. To live your life without getting to 6 seconds, because your brain immediately says fear when it gets to 6 seconds. So just live life. So I decided to go skydiving. At 49 years old, I decided to go skydiving. And I was cocky as all get out. Like, I was going to do this. I'm a mother of six. I had words written across my arm, across my hands that said, no doubt. I took one of my daughters, came with me. We go into the plane. The plane is open, going up to 17,000 feet. I'm the first person that they're going to push out of the plane, get to the edge. They don't give you any time to count, because if you count, you're going to put your hands on the walls. So you just wait there until they push you out with your tattament, your tatum behind you. And that's life. We are cocky in the beginning of our lives. We are cocky thinking everything's going to be okay. And then we are pushed out of a plane. And we have to land. And they tell us that you don't land on your knees, you need to land on your ass. Make sure you're landing on your ass. And that's life. All of us have a life that we think, and we have these preconceived ideas. We have these wonderful dreams in our head as little girls, what life is going to look like. And life never looked like that. Life wasn't the momming and daddy, the two kids, the picket fence, and the little dog and the PTA. Life was being thrown out of a plane, not knowing how you were going to land, and being okay to get back up. And then the Tatum guy says, hey, do you want to do this again? And I said, hell no. Never. Like, I only want to live this life once. So, that's what life is like. It's like jumping out of a plane and not knowing where you're going to land.
Wow. Just know that you got to land on the best way sometimes just to land on your ass,
You
right?
just have to land on your ass sometimes.
Right. And I love how you chose to take back the power. What
Mhm.
happened? Like, and it probably like you had an aha moment, but over time you started to take back the power, and you started. Where did you recognize, like in the little details, like the little, not the big things, but where you gave like somebody else your power,
Mhm.
and how it switched when you chose to take it back? And I'm not talking about the big things. I'm talking about like the little everyday things. Like, where did you start seeing that and making those little detailed switches?
Well, I would definitely say it was, in 1986 while I was on a bridge ready to end my life, and then finding out that I was pregnant as a teenage girl, and I surrendered my life to Christ. At that moment, I surrendered
That
my
was a
life.
big moment. Yeah.
That was a big moment, and that was a changing moment, in my life. I didn't understand what it meant to serve God, but I knew that I wanted to because I knew that He saved me and He saved my baby. That I could have.
So
Go
so
ahead.
you took your power from that victim, and you kind of, you took it back, and you gave it to God, who could
Yes,
hold it for you when you didn't have, the strength to carry the power. You decided to
absolutely.
give it to a higher power that was greater. And how did that show up in your everyday life? Because you made some other, you didn't, you wind up, it sounds like you gave it to a couple husbands that didn't make good choices, but and then you realize you took time to learn to grow yourself, make better decisions yourself. So after those two husbands that didn't work out well, and maybe some contingencies along the way, now you're seeing like you're probably making some different micro decisions. How
Absolutely.
does it, how does it show up in your micro decisions?
I think that it shows up, when you wanted to talk about before we got on. I don't know if it was before or what, but you talked about the table talk that I experienced with people, in my job. For 17 years, I worked for the United States Census Bureau and I worked for the Nielsen TV ratings. And each one of those jobs got me at a door to knock on the door and to sit in their homes. Each one of them, I had to either do a survey or they were picked, to be part of the ratings. And I had to sit at their tables. And when you have to sit at hundreds and hundreds of people's tables and hear their stories, if you
Mm.
don't change, then you're definitely in the wrong job. And if you don't take those stories and have them transform you, it was I am so blessed and so honored that I had those 17 years to be part of people's lives, because we have preconceived ideas about people. We have preconceived ideas about places that people live. Until we knock on those doors, you have a preconceived idea, and all of us are guilty of it. There's not one person that's not guilty of a preconceived idea.
We naturally judge.
We
What
naturally
were some stigmas or some judgments that, where did you get some idea,
You
where were
know,
your
from one
shifts?
of them, I interviewed a woman that lived in Malibu, lived in a gated community, lived on the hill, a $6 million home, and the most broken woman that I've ever met in my life. That I sat and listened to her story, and then when she was done telling her story, she laid on my lap and cried like a baby.
Oh,
We have this idea that these multi-million-dollar homes, they have it all together. The preconceived idea that when you go to a trailer park, we immediately in our head go, oh, dirty, not
judgment.
judgment. We all do it. And then when you have to knock on that door and you realize that God took you to that door because you needed to hear their story, because their story was pretty remarkable,
Right.
and it changed you. And so there is, you go into the projects and you think, oh my goodness, I'm stuck in the projects and now it's roast infested. You have these, constant ideas about people. But when you start meeting people where you're at, even if you are a black and white person, which I'm a pretty black and white person, there is so much gray in life because our stories transform us. When you go to a home and you see somebody struggling with things that you would have never, nobody else would have been to these people's homes. They weren't homes that anybody else would have ever walked into, but I had to walk into them. And I had to walk into them, but I walked out of those homes changed and transformed and renewed, and a piece of me left and a piece of me came, they gave me a piece of themselves.
What was the biggest transformation in your thinking?
Um because I am a born again Christian, and because, there's some belief system that people have. I think that I learned the difference between religion and relationship. I learned that I could have a relationship with people and hear their stories and not have a judgment. Now I began to start understanding why people do the things that they do, and having compassion for them. I was I was a mom of 4 children by the age of 22 years old. I started homeschooling my children with no education. I had a 10th grade education, and I homeschooled my children for 27 years. So I was in this little bubble, this little Christian bubble. And then I had to go out into the world. I had to go out into the world and see that life happens and life sucks, and there's some bad things and there's some great things, and all of that can transform you. So those are just little tidbits that were put back into my heart that gave me a heart of compassion, and then also started my ministry or whatever, or my platform, Healing Through Stories, because I believe that the more stories that you hear, and the more times that you tell your story, the more transformed you become, and then you lock arms and you become a tribe.
Yeah. So, um, what like so your biggest transformation, like if you were like to look at you had that time on the bridge, and then you've got the stories across the table, and then you've gotten those deals. Is there anything that you're like a habit that you switched that made a big impact, like any habits that shifted in
Well,
there?
I would say, because I stopped the preconceived ideas. I started looking at those doors just as those doors, and not having an idea in my head on what I was walking into, because
Yeah.
then I was willing to be vulnerable. No matter what the door was, I was willing to be vulnerable when I knocked in that door and that person opened the door. Years ago, I had a dream that when I was like 25, I had a dream that I was asked to go on a platform and asked to give my testimony. And when I went out into when I looked out to the audience, the whole audience looked like homeless people. They smelled, there was a nasty aroma. Their clothes were dirty and things like that. And I began to start talking and began to start speaking life and began to start telling what had happened in my life. And I saw the aroma change. It was a sweet aroma. And then the women and the men, their clothing changed. And then there was new words written across their chest: forgiven, blessed, daughter of the king, clean, cleansed, clean. And I realized that that's my mission. That's my platform,
Yeah.
is to be there, to be the one that, if there is somebody in my presence that feels dirty, I'm here to tell my story so you can feel clean. And then we can lock arms together. And, everybody has a mission, everybody has a purpose, everybody has a destiny. And we just have to, it's kind of like Simon Sinek. Years ago, I had a life coach, and I did the book, What is Your Why? When you find out your why, and you find out why you were created for this moment, this time, it changes and transforms your life mightily. It's like
Yeah.
a totally, like, it's an eye opener. It's kind of, you said about my name, my name is Bambi Lynn. And you said, for a long time, people made fun of my name. And I took the world's view of my name, because when you think about my name, it's an exotic dancer name. It is a name that men would say
Oh,
to
that's
me.
funny. I did not even think that. I was thinking Bambi the deer. I was like,
Yeah.
what?
But men, and that's such a difference, but men think of my name as they've asked me, where are you going to dance tonight? Hey, what are you going to do? And I realized, my name affected me. My identity affected me. And I went to the beach one day, and I had an argument with God. Said, why did you do this? Why would you name me Bambi? And I said, I'm going to change my name to Janet. If I go to the bookstore and my name's not written in a book, if the meaning of my name is not in the bookstore, I'm changing my name to Janet. And it was about $800 to do that. And I went to the bookstore and I laid out all the name books at the bookstore, because I'd never seen my name. The first book didn't have my name in it. The second book had my name in it, and my name together. My first name is Bambi. My middle name is Lynn, and it means holy child put together. So when I got that, it changed my identity. It changed how I looked at myself. It
It
changed.
changed how you believed. to
Absolutely. It
believe.
changed the reflection that I saw in, in the mirror. It changed that here I sold my body, so to speak, in back seats of people's cars when I was a kid, a teenager, because I thought that's what my worth was. But when God showed me that my worth is Bambi Lynn, holy child, that was firecrackers. That was fireworks. That was, you know, that
Was
was
that the
transformation.
demarcation, the sign in the line in the sand that said
Absolutely.
that, like, moving forward, that this is who I was, and now this is who I am.
Absolutely. That now every time somebody says Bambi Lynn, they're
You
speaking
are a
life,
holy child.
and they're speaking life into me. And I accept that life. And because I accept that life and because it's who I am, I can go out and I can share my story with confidence. And I can also put my arms around you as you share your story, because now you, just like my book, writing my books, I wrote them not for me. When I got my book in the, for the first time, and I read it all the way through, I closed the book and I'm like, God, that's not me anymore. But now it's my mission to go find these women that are this, and to give them the courage and the bravery to be able to be set free from their past. So my book and my story is a first aid kit for other people, for
Mm.
the people behind me that need to have that courage. Because my superpower, I told somebody the other day, they asked me, Bam, what do you think your superpower is? I said, vulnerability. Vulnerability, because I'm willing to be vulnerable to tell my story so that others had the courage and the bravery to tell theirs. That's
And when,
pretty,
and that allows you, when you, that gives you the freedom,
yes.
because now you're not hiding anything, you're not
Nope.
holding anything. There's no elephant in the room. No,
Nope.
there's nobody can come back and say, "Hey, Babby Lynn, da 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 da." There's no
Exactly.
da 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 da. You know exactly who you are. You know the scars, you know the goods, the bads, and you've accepted them. And
Exactly.
take and it sounds like you've taken full accountability and responsibility
Yes.
for
Oh,
your
and that's
part.
not easy. And that is not easy for people to be able to look in the mirror and say, I'm at fault. That's not easy. What my children went through, because we went through two divorces, a single mom, poverty, and me being so legalistic and judgmental because I just wanted to raise good children and I didn't want to leave anything to chance. What they went through because of that, what our children go through, because we're just growing continually. So when
Right.
mothers say, oh, I raised them all the same way, no, we didn't, because we are at different stages in our lives. So our
Yeah.
children paid some of the consequences, for some of our behaviors as we were broken and trying to get fixed. We're laying it all on our children, and you have to take
Yeah.
responsibility. My second husband, that I was a victim of domestic violence, I saw the red flags, and I
Mhm.
still chose to marry him and have twins with him, and knowing that now I'm going to live this life having to hide and having to figure out a way to stay away from him because of the abuse. I shouldn't have married him in the first place. There was red flags. So you have to take responsibility, for your actions. That's the only way you grow.
Yeah, and well, and once you did, now you recognize, like, okay, where's my part on this? Da da da. Now I
Absolutely.
know how to. Once you are aware, right? Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of taking the blinders off, taking the blindfold off, and acknowledging and looking at the dirt and the grit. So when you took it, and you looked inside, looked at yourself, and took full responsibility. I'm sure, like, that went through phases. Like, we're
Yeah.
still going.
Definitely phases.
I'm sure you're still going through. And like,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
damn, I could make a better choice,
Yeah.
right? Like, but like, how did that shifting, when you stopped, like, blaming others, giving the responsibility to others, like, they did this to me, this happened because of this, like, somebody, like, it's not on me and how I choose to see it,
Yeah.
right? Like, that happens, how did that transformation, like, go? How is that? How did it start? Is it going? Where do
Yeah.
you see it going?
I just, you know what, I think it really starts off with the fact to be the realization that the trauma that you went through is not your fault. I think that that's the first thing that I had to do. I had to realize the decisions that people made towards me and to me, and the things that I went through, they're not my fault. It
They
wasn't.
have free choice. Like,
They have the free choice.
where's that line between taking like accountability and
Mhm.
responsibility and knowing that they have their choices too? Like,
Yeah.
where do you find that? Because that's an odd, that's a middle ground, like that's like a dance. How does that
Yes.
work
And I
for
think
you?
it's a continual dance. It's not something that just you wake up one morning and you do this. It's kind of like the peeling of an onion. You have to go layer by layer by layer. But I think for me, the first layer was understanding that what I went through wasn't my fault, because I think that victims of trauma, they carry that so much on themselves. If I would have looked at this way, if I didn't do this, if I didn't walk down this street, if I didn't, but then once you realize that somebody else made those choices in your own life,
Mhm.
and you just happen to be the victim of those choices, I believe that that's the beginning of that was the beginning of my healing. That was the beginning of me letting it go. And now let's deal with the residue and the pain that came along with that. I had my son just recently, one of my sons, he just recently, we were talking and he said, Mom, I didn't realize all this trauma happened to you before even the age of 30 years old. And he said, and you lived your life with all the crumbs down on the ground, and you're picking up the crumbs of people's lives and what people think about you when you never understood that you belonged at the banqueting table. And that was a realization of understanding I didn't deserve those crumbs. I did deserve to sit at the table, but because of the trauma and because of the things I had gone through, I always thought that I was second rate. I always thought that I was never going to amount to anything, because that's what I was told. I was told over and over again, you're never going to be anything. You're nothing but trailer trash. You think you're going to make it on this world. You can't. And I began, for some part of that, I began to live that. And then you
Oh,
wake up.
those words they were that those were just bars that they were just putting on your cell. Those
Absolutely.
were, yeah.
Absolutely. And the Bible is very clear that God opens up the prison gates and he lets the captive free. And once you've been set free, you can't go back. Once you really experience freedom, you don't want to go back to bondage. Once you experience the freedom of being you, and by standing in the mirror and looking at the beauty of who you are, you don't want to go back to something.
Yeah.
I just went on a cruise. I just got back from a cruise, and I got to wear beautiful dresses, and I felt so beautiful, because I got to dress up and I got to, be out on, at these dinner tables and stuff like that, feeling beautiful. And I think, because I am a Christian, I really believe that that's how God wants us to feel, because
Yeah.
he has made us that way. He has made us beautiful. But sometimes the world takes that beauty away from us, and we have to take back. We have to take back everything that people have stolen from us. And I think it really does come with age. I think that for women, we start becoming, like in our 40s and our 50s, we start awakening and realizing, whoa, I don't have to agree with this or that or stuff like that. There's something that, like, the seed, then it's like the
I
seed
think
in
our
the ground.
hormones our hormones hit and we're like, we just don't have time and energy for that
Yes.
anymore.
And then we start blooming. The
Yeah.
seed has been in the dark and it's been in the ground and it's been germinating. And then there's a moment that seed pops, and then we start blossoming. There's something that happens within a woman between the 40s and 50s that we just arrive in ourselves. It's like
Yeah.
we now know that we are our own superheroes. I don't need to, look up to Catwoman or Wonder Woman. I now wear the cape of a superhero. And when you begin to understand that and see that, you walk with your shoulders back, you walk with your crown fixed, because we have arrived. One of the I just wish that women would more lock our arms together and not compete with one another, because we're all arriving at the same spot. But when we want to take the joy from somebody else because we don't have it, then then we just we become looking like ugly again.
Right.
I am prettier now than I was in my 20s and my 30s.
Do you think it's are you talking about so I'm going to assume you mean physically, but I'm going to say
Oh,
that came from the inside.
yes.
I was sharing that with my one of my kids. I don't even remember which one. I'll assume it's my daughter because she's the girl and we have, because that's what society does. But we're just talking about how like happiness and
Hmm.
joy and confidence is actually what makes people really pretty.
Exactly.
And it's interesting how that works because you think because through the seasons, the what defines as pretty is like maybe a certain weight, a certain skin color, like certain like nose, lips, eye shape,
Yep.
whatever it is, like whoever defines that. But the common denominator is all somebody's opinion of what physical beauty um, is there's always that confidence. There's
Yes, absolutely.
always that kindness. There's always it's that thing that comes from the inside, right?
Yep.
And that is what seems to be the common denominator as styles, let's say style
Absolutely.
change.
Yeah, when I went on the cruise, we went to Nassau, the Bahamas, Nassau, and I just was so excited to be able to see the blue water and stuff like that. And so I decided, I had a cute little bathing suit on, nothing, I'm heavy and like, so it had to be somewhat. But I said, my daughter is Amber, and I said, let's do a photo shoot. And I just thought I was Bo Derek, like running, like pausing and, in the water, just, looking like I'm a cat, I wouldn't have done it in my 20s and my 30s, but I don't care. I'm going to be 55 on Wednesday and I just wanted to have fun. I just wanted to be
What
me.
a great example to Amber. To
Exactly. Exactly. So it was just such a cool thing. And I even posted one of them on my Facebook to say, this is me with all the scars that are beautiful because it's created me. That I wasn't afraid. In my 20s and my 30s, there'd be no way in God's creation that I would ever posted a single picture, on
Mhm.
Facebook or TikTok or whatever. But now I
What do you think that is? Do you think you would have been afraid to like you didn't believe that you're pretty or is it a combination of like you didn't want people to know like let's say you would have gone on this cruise and done this shoot, right? Let's pretend. Do you
okay,
think like other people's opinions would have mattered
absolutely.
more? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why people ask you, "Oh, do you want to go back to your 20s?" Hell no. No way. No way do I want to go back there. I just want to keep becoming. And every Tuesday night I go out to dinner with women that are all older than me. And we just celebrated one that's 92 years old. Like
There's the
and
wisdom
every
there.
week I go out to dinner, with these women, and I'm the youngest. So here I'm 55 and I'm the youngest to all these women. And it is so awesome to watch them blossom and to watch them, be who they are. And that's what it is. Like, and they've had some stories. They have incredible heartache that they have been through and things like that in life. But they have taught me a lot of
So
sitting
what do you
around
think
with
is
them.
the difference in like the first half of the century and the second half of the century? So you've seen women in the first half of their century, adult wise, and then the adulting in the last half of the century. What do you think is the biggest positiveness that comes in the second half that people can look forward to that you're finding as a common denominator?
I, you know, life doesn't life doesn't change. These women still go through heartache, but it's their attitude towards it because they've been through so much in their lives that they just take life as it is. It is
So
just
what's their attitude like? What
I,
like give me like more clarity on that attitude that that allows them to seem like they seem to be happier going through the
yeah.
second part of their journey. So what is that attitude like? Let's say when they face it, what is that process for their attitude like?
I just think that sometimes it is, like when I talk to them and I realize, oh my goodness, you've gone through all this, and they're just like, you know what, Bambi, shit happens, and you just wipe it up and you go on, and you're like, Yeah, but they're like, there's going to be a time, Bambi, in your life that trials are going to come and you're just going to say, okay, because there's nothing new under the sun. And they continue to
This
tell
too
me
will
that.
pass. This will pass.
That is their attitude. Like, and some of them have been through some really dark things that that they survived and they have thrived. And now they're all like, this too shall pass. There's nothing new under the sun. This too shall pass. Just walk forward in it and just continue to embrace who you are.
Yeah.
You're
Because
like,
good or bad, it's going to pass, right?
good or bad. Yeah,
It's because the time marches on. Time just
absolutely.
marches on, and it's how you. And it's interesting. I was talking to somebody, and they were talking about how
Probably your
when good
daughter.
thing, I don't when like people will say when good stuff happens, it goes so fast, and when bad stuff happens, time goes so slow. And I was like, well, why don't we make a conscious decision, right, to switch that? If something bad's happening, like let that go by fast, and when good
Yeah,
stuff happens, be very intentional on purpose and sit
yeah,
in that goodness and to marinate as deeply and as strongly as you can in the goodness of that time and let that and slow down that time on
yes,
purpose and
yes.
speed up the other time.
That
Or
was my book, that, The Treasures of My Heart, is about the fact that, some of the greatest treasures in our lives are in the storms. They're not in the happy times of our lives. The treasures come when we've gone through some stuff. When we are in a storm, then we can look back after the storm is over and we can see the treasures that we were given, and we can only been given them within the storm. And that was
some
the
of
whole
us sit in
purpose of
the
my
storm.
book,
Yeah.
The Treasures of My Heart. That was the purpose. Look at the story of the oyster. That oyster wouldn't have had that beautiful pearl if it hadn't gone through some storms. We're always trying to hang on to the happy times, which are great. Mountaintop experiences are amazing. But you know what? You also have to look down the mountain to see how you got there.
Yeah.
You didn't just fly up there and there you're on the mountaintop. You actually had to claw yourself. You had to walk yourself. You had to get some bruises and some scars to get to the mountain to be able to see the beautiful horizon. But it didn't come without a cost. So
And
I think
nobody
it's
goes up
important.
that mountain expecting not to have any trials, any tribulations. So who are we to think that we're going to go through life without trials and tribulations? Like maybe we need to just stop being so shocked when we do hit a trial.
Absolutely.
Maybe stop being so
Absolutely.
shocked when there is a tribulation, because that's what they said. Those sounds like those older ladies that you're hanging out with, they're not shocked.
Nope.
They're not surprised. They're like,
No.
oh yeah, they're like, oh yeah, here's another one. Do, 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 do. Just keep
Nope.
marching along. Yeah,
And we
I
just
love
need
it.
to know that it's the valleys that get us to the mountaintop. It is the valleys that we go through that get us there. And rejoice to the fact that you got there, but also rejoice in the fact that you didn't give up and you got there.
Right.
Because the Bible's really clear that 7 times you fall. It's not the falling that matters, it's the getting back up. It's the realizing that I can't stay fallen. It's the realizing that life happens, and let's just move on from them and see what we're learning from them. I would not be, there's that movie, The Butterfly Effect, because people will ask you all the time, if you could change one thing, what would you change? And I said, I wouldn't change anything. Because if I change anything in my life, I've changed even any trauma or any heartache in my life, I'd have to go through a different kind of trauma and heartache because the domino effects. I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be here speaking, to your audience to tell you that you're going to survive it. I wouldn't be here telling your audience that everything you're going through is because there's a pearl that's being created within inside of the shell of your trials and your tribulations. I wouldn't trade who I am. Some of it hurt to the core and it was painful, but I am me now. I'm me. And so all of that stuff made me me. And I love me. I love the vulnerability of me. I love the passion of me. I love the stories that God has given to me in the midst of all of this. Wouldn't trade me. Wouldn't trade me.
I'm just gonna breathe all that in. That was so beautiful. So I love like you've been through this. You're here now. Um, over the next 5 years, right? You're about to be 55. You're going to be 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. Those years are just going to fly by.
Yeah.
Waving a magic wand, what would you like to have accomplished by the time you're 60? What do your relationships look like? What is going to be some of your accomplishments in the next 5 years?
Definitely, people they're now like telling us that we only should do 3 years because 5 years seems so far away that we may stall until we get there. So I'm going to say
Until
the next.
3 years. Let's do three
Yeah.
years. I
Yep.
like that. Okay, forget 5 years. 5 years, 3 years. I like 3 years. I can 3 years is like actionable. 5 years is
Yes.
dream. Let's do
Right.
three. Let's take
Let's do
action on
three.
three.
So 3 years, my desire is to use my story, to be a motivational speaker, to be a woman of empowerment, to have a platform for healing through stories, to be able to speak across the country and across the world. My other dream is to be on a TED Talk. So I would love to do a TED Talk, which would be amazing. The other thing is that I would love some restoration in my family. I would love to make enough money that I have all of my children have to be at one place, all of us all together, and have to hire some counselors or some life coaches and stuff like that. And we can't leave the island until everything has been dealt with. I would love to be able to do,
Maybe not healed, but at least everything has been pulled out of the pantry, and then we
yes,
can
yes.
start packing it back up and putting it away. I
Exactly.
love
I
that.
would love to do that of that.
Pull all the skeletons out.
All the skeletons, how much you don't like me, what I did, to make you not like me. What is it that one person thinks that I'm a villain and the other person thinks I'm a hero? Let's work it out. I have another book that's coming out this year, and I would love to write another book using the story of the monarch butterfly and Christianity and how they correlate together. My third book that's coming out is The God Who Sees, which I took 29 different women of the Bible and made them more relatable today and told their
Oh,
stories from not a human perspective, but told their stories through a modern way for us women to realize that within the Bible, there are all these stories of women in the Bible that we all can glean from. So,
I love that.
yeah,
That will be. I'm like, that's gonna be so good
yeah.
and almost terrifying. I'm a little afraid.
Like I told the story, one of the stories I talked about was the story of Eve. She was the first mother. She had no tribe around her. She had a son that killed one son, and the other son had to be put away, kind of like in jail. So I told the story about no matter what we as women go through with our children, we're still there in our children's corner. And she still had to grieve the death of dreams that she had for her own children. She still had to go and find, like as mothers, if anything happened to our children, we would still go to the prison every week to go visit them because we're moms. So I told the story of Eve and made her more human, of realizing that she's a mom that had to go through some stuff, and that stuff that we as mothers don't want to talk about because we're ashamed. A lot of times we're ashamed if our children do something outside of what we thought that they were going to do. So I told her story in that way.
Oh, I love this. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for just bringing your amazing energy open to sharing your story and allowing us to glean from your experiences. And really your energy's so dynamic and so fun.
Thanks.
It's like you're very captivating in the way you share your story, and very much makes it feel like anybody can overcome whatever it is they're
Absolutely.
going through. So it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to believe it.
Yes.
And then
Absolutely.
once you believe it, or maybe and it's another to take action. So like,
Yes.
I see people who don't believe it, but they take action until they believe it. And
Yep.
we see
Kind
so
of like
much.
fake it till you make it.
It'll come. The universe does respond, right? And I absolutely love it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
thank
Is
you
there
so much.
anything else that maybe we didn't cover? You're like, oh man, I wish we would have covered that.
No, I just wanted to talk about, I do have a website,
Yeah.
it's called healingthroughstories.com. It's all one word, healing through stories. I am a blogger. I do write stories every week, and right now that if anybody joined or subscribed, to my website and wanted to purchase anything, there is a code that when you go on my website that you get 10% off. So if anybody wanted to go and join and subscribe and wanted to purchase my book or even a t-shirt, I sell t-shirts that say my story, your first aid kit, and the front of it has a first aid kit. As a
Oh,
conversational piece, for people to wear. Actually sewed some on, I wore it on our cruise, and it started conversations, and that's what was meant to be. So I would love for, and if people want to
what's the
find
code?
me, what?
What's the code?
It's when you pop it up, it pops up.
Oh, it's on the site. So
Yep,
that
it's
once
on the
they go
site.
on your site, healingthroughstories.com, they go there and then they'll get the code and then they'll get the 10%
And
off.
they'll get the 10% off. So if anybody's wanting to, read my story, and to have the
Get
courage,
your book.
yep, and get the courage to tell their own story. So to be your own superhero in your own life.
I absolutely love that. I'm excited for you to be on TED Talk and I'm excited to hear it all. Thank
Well, thank
you.
you so much. Thanks. Have a
I
great day.